Welcome to Haunted Escapes with Chris and Diane.
This podcast will talk about strange and mysterious stories from around the world.
Some will be about places we've been and experienced for ourselves,
as well as things we've learned and read about, including hauntings, folklore, and cryptids.
Join us on our Haunted Escapes. On Valentine's Day in 1929, four men, two disguised as police officers, entered the SMC Cartage Company garage in Lincoln Park, Chicago. They were there to meet a group of 7 members and associates of the North Side Gang. The gang and their associates were lined up against the wall and shot multiple times. One of the victims, Frank Gusenberg, was still alive when police arrived on the scene. Despite receiving 14 bullet wounds, he was stabilized for a short time but refused to talk when police questioned him, saying, "No one shot me." He died 3 hours later. The 7 victims were Adam Hayer, Frank Gusenberg, Pete Gusenberg, John May, Al Weinshank, and James Clark, as well as a visitor, Dr. Reinhard H. Schwimmer. This all happened during the time of Prohibition, where the sale and consumption of alcohol was outlawed in America. The reason behind this massacre was because the North Side Gang had reportedly hijacked some expensive whiskey from Al Capone's gang when he was smuggling it from Canada through the Detroit River. The big plan behind this was to get rid of Bugs Moran, who was the head of the North Side Gang. Capone and Moran were both trying to get control of the bootlegging trade in Chicago, and Al Capone, who was in Florida at the time, is widely assumed to have been behind the massacre, though never tried for this crime. Moran had also taken over several saloons that were run by Capone, insisting they were not in his territory. The plan was to lure Moran there with a supply of stolen whiskey. Moran was not in attendance at the time of massacre. Lee, having left his apartment late, he drove by the garage but saw a police car nearing the building, so he and fellow gang member Ted Newberry hid out in a nearby coffee shop. Capone's men most likely mistook Albert Weinshank, who was the same height and build as Bugs Moran. After the shootings, the killers knew that the public had heard the gunfire, so in an effort to reassure the public, 2 men dressed as police officers drew their guns and led the other 2 men into the waiting police car they had arrived in. One innocent victim in this was Highball, a German shepherd belonging to John May. The dog was tied to the bumper of a car while the murders were taking place. He was so distraught after this that it was decided that the most humane thing to do would be to put him down. His crying is what alerted the public to the crime. Welcome to Haunted Escapes with Chris and Diane.
Hello!
As you heard, today we're going to be doing an episode on the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. In honor of Valentine's Day, we decided to cover the St. Valentine's Day Massacre and the hauntings and the curse that everybody says goes along with it.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts about the entire St. Valentine's Day Massacre?
Well, we're going to get into some theories about it later, but my money is on Al Capone. I think there was a big turf war between him and the Bugs Moran, and I think he was trying to take over all the bootlegging in the city, so I think he was behind it. And also, I think it's really crazy how the Gusenberg guy, he was on his deathbed and still wouldn't say who killed him. Even though he's dying, this is like probably his last words, but he still wouldn't give it up.
Yeah, that's because the whole secrecy oath that they take when they join the mob. Now, I don't agree with Diane. I don't think that it was Capone. I mean, it could have been, but there's another thing, as we'll get to in a minute, by a undercover FBI agent, and I think that his idea behind what happened makes the most sense. So, for right now, we're going to get into the theories. So, one theory is that some police were behind the massacre, but very quickly this rumor was squashed by the Chicago PD. Other theories were that this was done by Detroit's Purple Gang, where the whiskey shipment was coming from that day, and that they were the ones behind it.
See, I had heard that the Detroit's Purple Gang were aligned with Capone as well. That's why most of my belief is that he's behind the whole thing.
I mean, that very well could have been. A bank robber named Fred Burke was found with a small arsenal of weapons, and 2 of the guns were from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but he was never tried with the crime. The police never made their questioning public, and Burke died 11 years later in prison for a different murder.
Now, what do you think about that one?
Something fishy was going on there.
So, do you think the police had any involvement with it?
Could have been. There was a lot of things back then where a lot of police were on the take, and the mob would pay them off for things, and that's why they were able to do stuff and get away with it. So it very well could have been. There's always crooked cops out there.
Yeah, and the two of the killers were dressed as police officers, so where would they have gotten those uniforms? There was no Amazon back then.
No, that's also part of what I think, as I said in a little bit, that we'll be getting to the reasoning I believe is the best one. But for right now, the next theory is that in 1935, Byron Bolton was another criminal. He said he was one of the lookouts. He said that he gave the signal when he saw Albert Weisenshank, who he mistook for Moran, among the 7 being led into the garage. However, the police were so fixated on trying to nail Capone, they just totally overlooked his theory and didn't listen to it at all.
That's interesting. I mean, if you're the police, this guy comes to you and says, I was one of the lookouts. Why wouldn't you take that seriously? I mean, I know they're laser focused on trying to get Capone, but if you have somebody who's almost confessing in a way, why wouldn't you at least hear him out?
Well, they probably thought that at the time he was just a mob guy who was trying to take the fall for his boss.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
But that type of stuff happened all the time, too.
Could you imagine taking the fall for... Okay, so say you're in a gang and this shooting happens, and the boss goes to you and be like, you're going to be the fall guy, you got to go to the cops and confess to everything. Would you do it? Yeah,
you have to. Or else who knows what they would do to you, your family. That's why you shouldn't get mixed up in this stuff to begin with, and then you don't got to worry about it. Though overlooked by the police, the media picked up on Bolton's claims, and they posted it all over. Now, this is the thing that I think makes the most sense. Frank Farrell, an undercover investigator, wrote a letter to J. Edgar Hoover detailing his thoughts. He concluded that William Davin, Jr., son of a Chicago police sergeant, had been shot during a bar fight at a popular gangster hangout. While dying in the hospital, he confided to his cousin, William White, that he had been shot by some members of Moran's gang, including one of the Gusenberg brothers. Now, William White was also known as Three-Fingered Jack. He was another big-time criminal underground guy who was known for his brutality. Now, according to the letter, White had an easy way to avenge his cousin. White and Gusenberg brothers had worked together on a robbery a few years ago. During the robbery, they had sent 2 fellow gang members dressed as cops to go dispose of a rat.
It's interesting.
So then White had gotten a hold of the Gusenberg brothers, and he told them to reach out to Moran's gang and schedule a meeting at the garage where the massacre would later take place. This makes a lot of sense it made a lot of sense to Farrell, and it also explains why so many of Moran's gang were present and dressed for a business meeting, and why there were 2 dressed as cops. The North Side gang would have never suspected a setup, which is why they never got any shots off. White had the connections to set up a meeting, a motive, and it explains why the cops did not investigate, as it could have showed possible dealings between cops and criminals. J. Edgar Hoover very well may have known all this, but he hid it because he was so set on getting Capone. And they said that this letter is hidden in the archives. And eventually they did get Al Capone, who was finally arrested in 1931 for income tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years. And after they caught Capone, everything was just dropped. So it's kind of fishy, if you ask me.
See, so this guy, this William White's cousin, so he's on his deathbed, and he confided.
Yeah, well, because he's not in the mob. He was just at one of their hangouts. His cousin was in it.
Yeah.
But that don't mean he was. So he told his cousin what happened. Or maybe he just he figured he was going to die anyway. Mm-hmm. So he might as well try to take out the people who killed him.
But do you really think... Okay, so he wasn't in the mob. I don't know. Maybe he was in the mob, kind of, or he hung out with them because his cousin was in the mob, and they seemed close to me.
Well, yeah, he probably did hang out with some of them, but it doesn't mean he necessarily was, like, in it. But he could have been, and that could have been why he's also the police sergeant's son, and if it got out that a police sergeant's son was hanging out with the mob and got shot in a mob place, it would look bad on the police. So the police, of course, would just sweep that under the rug because they wouldn't want that to get out.
But wouldn't William of White went to him and been like, look, William, like, you never rat out anybody even on your deathbed, no matter what.
Well, again, even if he had said that, the guy might not have even been in the mob. He might have just, this William Davin, he might have just hung out with some of them, but it doesn't mean that he joined it.
But that's what I'm saying. He's so close to his cousin who's in the mob, he's gonna, in my opinion, probably gonna take on some of the ways they do things.
But see, that's not true. You could have somebody who you knew who was in it, but if you're not in it, those holdings don't really count for you. Like, yeah, they could be, oh, well, is so-and-so, will they talk, will they not talk? But if he didn't take that oath, and even if he did, what the hell does he care? He's dying anyway. If he wants to get revenge, and he wants to get the people who did it.
I guess so. But then, also, like, J. Edgar Hoover has this letter and kept it secret and hid it in the archives just so he could bring down Al Capone. I think because they got Al Capone on tax evasion, they were going to get him eventually.
Well, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that they were just, like, zeroed in on trying to get Capone. So many other things that got said probably wouldn't have really been, I mean, he might not even have hit it purposely. It might have just been something where, like, yeah, whatever. And they put it away because they were so laser focused on getting Capone, because that was Hoover's big thing, because Capone was the big underground criminal in Chicago, and they wanted to try to clean it up because it had gotten so ridiculous over there. So, I don't know. I think that this makes a lot of sense, but it could be the other thing. They both theories work, but I just think this one has a lot, it explains a lot more. Like, even if it was Capone's people, why would the Moran gang not have fired no shots? Why were they just going down there dressed up for a meeting and then gotten blasted?
Because they thought that they were getting in a shipment of whiskey.
Yeah, but even with the shipment of whiskey coming in, I still don't... You would have thought that they would have been at least leery, because these types of things happened all the time. There were going to be shootouts all the time over it. So, I don't know. I think that this theory by this investigator is really good, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
It's a good theory, and at the time, I mean, Al Capone was liked by the people in Chicago because he was opening, like, the soup kitchens and doing a lot of charitable work. The police, were dead set against him, and after this is what made the public really turn against Capone.
Yeah, and it's definitely, who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
So, that's, if you guys haven't, anybody listens, which one do you think has reasoning behind it that makes sense, the most sense to you? Just leave a comment.
Yeah, I'll put out a poll on this episode, and you can vote whether you think it was Al Capone or it was this William White, who was behind the whole massacre.
Yeah, so now on to the hauntings that go with it.
Yes, this is the fun part.
Yes. So Al Capone is said to have experienced the ghostly visitor of James Clark. James Clark was Moran's brother-in-law. When Al Capone was a prisoner in Eastern State Penitentiary, other inmates would hear him asking Jimmy to leave him alone. After he was released, Capone was still haunted by the ghost of James Clark. It is said that in 1931 he tried to send Moran to the other side via a medium, but it didn't work.
Mm-hmm. See, this gives more credence to my theory that he was behind it.
Maybe.
Or, maybe it wasn't James Clark who was haunting him, and it was somebody else that he had killed who was haunting him.
Who had that name. Who knows? The garage, which was marked as SMC Cartage Company, has been demolished, but people say that the site is haunted. People have reportedly seen outlines of the bodies on snowy days. The sounds of men moaning, gunshots, and bodies falling to the ground have also been heard on the site. People who are sensitive tend to get a feeling of dread. Dogs tend to react when they go by the site, and the garage perhaps picking up energy from highball. The site is now a yard for the Margaret Day Apartments, and the city vows that nothing will ever be built there again.
Yeah, I heard, I mean, again, it's a city. Gunshots, screaming, it's par for the course. If you're walking down this street close to where this garage used to be and you hear moaning, gunshots, and things like that, I'd be scared.
Well, yeah, especially if you go to check it out and there ain't nothing there.
And then to see the outline of a body in the snow.
Yeah, that would be weird.
That's kind of crazy. I don't know what I would do if I saw that. What would you do if you're walking and just see an outline of a body in the snow? Would you think it was just somebody making a snow angel?
I don't know. That'd be pretty cool.
For the city saying that nothing will ever be built there again, I think that's pretty accurate there. I mean, I know these people were criminals, but yeah, you have to have respect.
Yeah, it's still respect for the dead. Now, residents of the Margaret Day Apartments have been visited by the 7 victims. He was just there, a resident said. He was dressed in a suit and hat, standing against the wall. He just stared at me like he was looking through me. I turned to get my phone, and when I looked back, he was gone. It was frightening. I told security, and they said they had seen him too.
Yeah, so cool. Apparently that the residents of this apartment building have all kinds of apparitions showing up, like in the hallways in their apartments and stuff.
That's pretty crazy.
Could you imagine just looking over and seeing somebody dressed in a 1920s suit and tie? They dressed so nice back then. I don't know what happened to us. Somebody standing there just looking right through you like they're looking at something else.
Just seeing something like that alone, even without seeing them looking through you, would be weird. When the garage was demolished, the bricks became collector's items, especially those that had bullet holes or blood on them. Now that tells you how morbid people are.
Why would you want that?
Seriously. Some people who had purchased the bricks were in terrible accidents or getting diseases. Stories about the bricks being cursed spread. Serves them right.
Yeah, so morbid. I don't know why you would want... It's the same thing like something from like a relic from the Titanic. Why would you want something like that has such bad history?
I mean, you could say that about any history. A lot of items have bad history connected to them.
But something, for sure, like something bad happened on this spot or happened in the present of this object.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want no brick with a bullet hole from some guy who got killed. Nah, I would pass on that one.
Well, alright, so you're really into, history and the wars and stuff. And they sell, bullets and stuff down in Gettysburg. Would you ever buy one of those?
I don't know, because those bullets are usually bullets that didn't actually, hit anybody.
How do you know, though?
Well, they would find, if it was and they had, blood and stuff on them, they wouldn't be selling them, I wouldn't think. Or if they would, I wouldn't want it. But just to have, a bullet from that time, that'd be kind of interesting.
So, I'm not saying that you would do this or anything, but say you go to Gettysburg with a metal detector, and you're there and you're walking around the battlefield, and you get a hit on something, and you dig it up, and it's a bullet or a belt buckle or something. Would you take that home?
No, I would probably take it to a museum.
Okay. But if you were allowed to, would you take it home?
I don't think so. I would probably take it to a museum.
Well, why wouldn't you want it?
I don't know. It was somebody's, and I guess it's the same reason I wouldn't want the bullet with blood on it or a brick with blood on it. And it was somebody who passed away and died. So I would want to give that to a museum, or better yet, you should just leave it there, because you shouldn't be moving things and interrupting their final resting places.
Because you're afraid it would be cursed.
I don't know if I'm afraid it would be cursed. I just don't think that it's right. In 1972, George Pate, a Canadian entrepreneur, opened a nightclub and used the bricks as part of the men's restroom wall. When the nightclub closed, he started selling the bricks at $1,000 each. However, as fast as the bricks were being sold, they were returned to him because the purchasers would have financial ruin, get stricken with disease and illness, and have overall bad luck. Now, if you gave me a belt buckle that was found from the Civil War and you told me that it may be cursed or have a ghost attached to it, that I would probably definitely leave it alone, because, I would not want that juju in the house. I got enough crazy, scary stuff that happens in my house. I don't need anything else.
So everybody knows you're in love with George Washington. Now, I remember we watched an episode of Pawn Stars a while ago, and one of George Washington's outfits was up for sale. And if you were able to, would you have bought that?
Or I don't think I would have bought that. No, it should be in a museum. So that should be in a museum where you can actually see it.
So you won't want to like cuddle with it or sleep with it at night or nothing.
No. A total of 300 bricks are on display at the Las Vegas Mob Museum. I want to go there sometime.
I want to go there too. That sounds like fun.
The sounds of gunshots, men moaning, and the sound of bodies falling to the ground have been heard. Now imagine being a poor bastard working the night shift there. You're walking around and all of a sudden you hear that.
Nope, I would quit.
I'm clocking out. I'm going home early.
Or just the janitor walking by doing his nightly routine and just be like, oh, I hear the bodies falling again.
Yeah, he's just like, how you doing? There's a 4-story building that stands next to where the garage had been. There are reports of poltergeist activity, things falling off shelves and counters. That's pretty cool. I could see that all happening. It makes sense. It fits all the themes with ghosts. And that close to where it was at, there's like it's kind of like a bomb blast zone that probably a lot of buildings around it are like, they probably all have stories they can tell about it.
Yeah, I was watching a video where they showed the 4-story building, and you could see where the roof on the wall of the 4-story building, you could see there's like a line of bricks where the roof of the garage would have been, because I'm guessing because it was so close, like there's a lot of residual energy that just got transferred over to that building too.
Yeah, like I said, it's like a blast zone where a bomb goes off. It has a certain radius that's probably affected. If you believe in ghosts, I mean, they can kind of go anywhere. Who's telling them they can't go to your house?
Yeah, but I would stay off of that block if I was in Chicago. I wouldn't go anywhere.
I mean, I would want to go by it just to see the stories, but...
Well, yeah, I would go...
I don't know if I would live there.
No, I would...
Like I said, I got enough crazy stuff that happens in my house. I don't need no more.
I would douse myself in holy water and then go over there with my little EVP recorder and try to get some EVPs. I
would like to go see it and see what other... I'm sure that there are a lot of tours around Chicago about, like, mafia... Mm-hmm. Because it was such a rampant thing there.
Maybe we can make a trip one day.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So that's our episode for this week's episode of Haunted Escapes. Where again we talked about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Yep, it was our special Valentine's Day episode, and what other thing to do except to give you ghost stories about a massacre that happened on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, right. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you drop some comments, like us, give us a couple stars, rate us good, all that good stuff. We're on all the channels that you can get podcasts. Again, we also do have a YouTube channel where we usually post these things the following weekend, usually with like pictures and slides of the haunted areas. So if you can't hear us on here, or you don't like listening to Spotify or one of these channels, you can always check us out the following week on YouTube. So yeah, thank you. And we also have merchandise at, what was it, Teespring? TeePublic.
Yes, we have Facebook is where I post most of the information. There's links to our TeePublic site on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. Still, we are going to get on Twitter eventually. And again, if you think that we've earned it, we would love to have a 5-star or a 4-star or whatever many stars you think we earned on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you for once again joining us on our Haunted Escapes.
Bye, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day.
Bye, everybody.
One more thing before we go. If you like our podcast, stay tuned for an ad of another podcast we think you would like.
Hello, I am Michael.
And I'm Rebecca.
And we are the hosts of Just Us Thinking.
Come and join us on Tuesdays and Thursdays to have a little fun and a good laugh or two.
We talk about all kinds of everyday things, and we like to have a few laughs ourselves.
You can find us on your favorite podcast player at Just Us Thinking, but make sure to drop that G.
Make sure you also hit that subscribe button, and you can follow us on Facebook.
Thank you for listening.